Welcome to Gracefully Graying. I am your host, attorney Henry Gornbein. Please watch this video and others on our YouTube channel, as well as visiting and liking our gracefullygraying.com website. Today on Gracefully Graying, I am pleased to welcome back as my guest, Lisa Zastrow, who is a partner in the Las Vegas, Nevada office of Lipson Neilson, as we discuss free speech in the workplace, which impacts upon those of us who are gracefully graying and working. Lisa, exactly what is cancel culture?
Well, thanks for having me back after our brief talk last time. This is a topic that is fascinating to me, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. Just discussing the idea of cancel culture can be controversial, but I think it's important because unfortunately what we're seeing now is a trend that is impacting us all, meaning not just Hollywood or not just politicians, but people like me, you, and this is an issue that should be on the radar of baby boomers, right? Because certainly, that age group, and even myself, we're looking to retire in the next, 2 years or 15 years. So, this idea of cancel culture is really something that has morphed into a 2020 phenomenon, or 2021, where something that you say or do could literally get you terminated from your job, or worse, strung up by the mob. I don't know if you know who the actor Mr. Bean is. Do you know the actor? He said he described cancel culture as the medieval mob looking to burn someone at the stake. So it's cancel culture is this idea that something that you say or do can be result in a boycotting or a canceling of you, your life, your job, and 5 years ago, I thought this ended with, the Salem witch trials, right? But now we have this modern day version of cancel culture, where we thought we had, evolved as a society and we have this concept of free speech. But now with the evolution of technology, this podcast, this video is going to be viewed for the public to see. We don't know who's going to watch it. I may say something that somebody may find offensive. Whether I mean it offensive or not, that person could then start sending letters to Lipson Neilson saying Lisa Zastrow needs to be fired for her opinions. That's the cancel culture. And we
living
see
in scary times. We really are.
We are in, and I'm glad to hear you say that because, sometimes I'm 46 years old. So I'm not a baby boomer. I'm this Gen X. And I often ask my parents, is this what life was like 20 years ago? No. 20, 30, 40 years ago, you could mention a political issue, right? You could say, I'm not for higher taxes, and that would not get you fired from your job. But most people didn't talk politics. Now, everything is political. Everything is a social issue. And we all, as humans who live and reside or live and function in a free society, the United States of America, we have opinions. And when we voice those opinions in the workplace and or on social media, we need to understand that the things that we say can come back to haunt us, whether what we say is intentionally harmful or if it's just an opinion that 10 years ago would have been a harmless opinion. There are so many, and that's the thing. The thing that's so alarming, I think, to some people is that when we think of cancel culture, we might think of, for me, this began on my radar about 5 years ago with the Me Too movement. And that movement began as a social movement to support those that have been sexually assaulted. Seems like an issue we can all get on board. And this hashtag Me Too came out, and then we saw high-profile celebrities like Harvey Weinstein being charged with crimes, criminal assault, and everybody gets behind the Me Too movement. Absolutely. Let's arrest and convict and try Harvey Weinstein for his crimes. Bill Cosby, another one. Seemed like something we could all get behind. That gradually changed, and the Me Too movement became more of this, believe all women. So an allegation could be made against my husband, whether it's true or not. And he, could lose his job just simply for the allegation. And that's the cancel culture. And so we look at Harvey Weinstein, Bill Cosby. They had their day in court. They were convicted of their crimes. But then, we started to see it move into a political arena. I think of Al Franken comes to mind. He was accused of some sexual harassment, I think maybe some assault, never charged with a crime, and he had to resign his seat in Congress. And he has come out against this mob mentality because of this Me Too movement and believe all women. He resigned. He was never charged, to my knowledge, and convicted with any crimes. And then we saw another example with Justice Kavanaugh, who spent his entire career never having an allegation against him of sexual assault or harassment or anything. Witness after witness after witness after witness during his confirmation hearing. Here he has a family. He's a constitutional law scholar. And then we have a woman come out and accuse him of sexual assault 30 years prior. The mob, the cancel culture mob, tried to prevent him from being confirmed to the Supreme Court. So my point is, what can begin as a social movement with good intentions, I've seen it being morphed and evolving into this, just exactly like what the actor said. It's this mob mentality to burn people at the stake for conduct that may not have even occurred and or speech. And so it's important to kind of understand that we're not just talking about high profile individuals. Some examples that people may have seen on TV in the last year or even 6 months, high profile situations that can be in this cancel culture definition. Goya Foods. You may recall that the CEO of Goya Foods, a Hispanic American, built his company through employing Hispanic Americans, voiced his support for a political candidate, and then the next thing you know, there are calls to boycott Goya Foods. That's an example of cancel culture. This mob, he comes out in support of President Trump. So therefore, that support in some minds has a connotation that what would result in wanting all these people to lose their jobs. J.K. Rowling, spoke out against her opinions on how transgender movements actually, in her opinion, sets back women's rights movements. She made that statement, and it's cost her big time. Mike Lindell, the CEO of MyPillow, his product has been dropped by over 20 vendors, Costco, because of his support for investigating election fraud in the 2020 election. So big corporations are canceling big corporations, but that is not, that's not necessarily impacting me or you, but yet it is, because before we went live, you and I were just briefly discussing a Supreme Court case that's going to be heard, where a cheerleader at a school made some comments on social media, and she was denied her position on the cheerleading squad. So that's something that impacts us lowly citizens. And just in the last 2 days, I just saw this yesterday. This is a very, very, very real hot topic that should concern everybody. Just yesterday, or maybe it was 2 days ago, a CEO in Tennessee was captured on camera criticizing a boy for wearing a dress to the prom. That CEO has been terminated from his job. So, and I'm not here to opine on if the statements are right or wrong. I'm here to discuss this concept of cancel culture. Now, should that man have stated his opinions? Did he know he was on camera? I'm not sure. He's now lost his job. He could have, it may be ruining his life. And we see, I think of Alan Dershowitz, because Alan Dershowitz is an icon. I'm an attorney. So, and I have a fascination with constitutional law. And Alan Dershowitz is a very, very famous civil rights attorney. He spent his entire career, he's probably most famous for.
Let me interject. He spent a lot of his career taking on very unpopular causes. I mean, he represented, I believe, Klaus von Bülow, who was accused of poisoning his wife. He was involved in the O.J. Simpson trial. And lately he's been accused of being involved with Epstein. And since then, he's kind of been quiet.
Yeah. So, exactly. So the Epstein issue. Well, first of all, he's been accused of being associated with a sexual predator. Many politicians have. Many politicians' names have appeared on the infamous pedophile island, right? So Alan Dershowitz was associated with Jeffrey Epstein. Now, Alan Dershowitz has denied any wrongdoing, but just the affiliation now with Jeffrey Epstein has, in some minds, completely undone all of his work in the past. And Alan Dershowitz was a professor at Harvard Law School for, I think, nearly 40 years. Someone can fact check me. But here he is, a professor of law. And because he's being accused of certain things, in the minds of the media, everything that he's done has been canceled. He used to appear on CNN. They don't have him on anymore. And he just this week said he did not think today in 2021 he would be able to get a job at a mediocre law school because of his current opinions. Now, he's an attorney, and the legal opinions about constitutional rights and due process overlap now with political agendas. So a minute ago, I was talking about Me Too. There's this whole Believe Women. I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but attorneys like myself or Alan Dershowitz might want to speak publicly about, well, anybody accused has the right to defend themselves. But we have this current culture that has been born out of, there's a lot of books written about this, so I'm not going to say what I believe has been born out of it, but certainly because of social media, one's opinions are broadcast all over the world. So, if you and I were talking in your office and we weren't recording, no one would see our conversation. But now everything's been blasted for the world to see. And you can find yourself like the CEO who's now lost his job. Now, what his criticism of the young man in the prom dress would be offensive. His employer decided to terminate him, and we can talk about that.
Lisa, we're living in very polarized times, for lack of a better word. I mean, where politics has become just totally polarized. Let's face it. And I think a lot of it has occurred over the last 4 years when, you know, and I don't want to get into a political argument, but it's like, because of social media, everything is out there. And because of the fact, if you say things expecting it to be private, but if you're in front of a hot mic or if you've left a video on, you know, you're in trouble if you said something that is offensive to everyone, and everyone has their weak spots or things that are offensive to them. So let's jump back in, and are we safe from repercussions on a coffee break?
And that's why I think this topic is so important. I mean, I love your website. I love what you do, and financial planning for the future, and setting up wills, and grandparents' rights, and all those things are very important to those gracefully graying. But those gracefully graying include myself, and this is a topic that needs to be understood, because there are very real repercussions due to the current climate that you just described. And if you lose your job, you're not going to be worried about setting up your trust, because you're not going to have an income anymore. You might lose your pension. So this is something that needs to be understood by everyone. So are there repercussions on a coffee break? So a couple of things. First, as we discussed last time, there are there are a million types of jobs. And there are a million job forces. One is government. So military, for example, or those in the executive branch. There are prohibitions for those types of jobs on what is regulated in terms of speech. For executive branch employees, there's what's called the Hatch Act. They have to be conscientious. They cannot go out on Fox News and spout their political opinions unless they're the president. I don't want to discuss that. Military, they're bound by the Uniform Code of Military Justice, right? In military, they have to be conscientious about what they say, because there's this military defense doctrine, and they have a mission, right? So, but I think what's more pertinent to what we're discussing is the private employment. Is what you say on a coffee break, are you free from repercussions? No. You have no right to free speech in the workplace. So this idea of cancel culture is mostly free speech, but it's also conduct. An employer has obligations and duties. They have to protect other employees, civil rights, the right against discrimination. And so there are essentially, I've identified 3 things, but there are more, and there are attorneys. There's the issue of free speech. There's the issue of Civil Rights Act for the non-discrimination and non-retaliation laws. So first of all, a lot of people don't understand free speech. They think if they're getting coffee with their colleague, they have the right to free speech. Well, that's nonsense. Free speech applies to government actors in terms of employers. If you are getting coffee with your colleague and you say something or do something that is, let's say, illegal speech, hate crime, you call someone a racial slur, you can be terminated. Now that would be the least that you would have to worry about, right? Hopefully that your termination doesn't get blasted on social media. So if you're getting coffee with your colleague, you don't want to talk about, first of all, if you're hate speech, illegal speech, unprofessional speech, bullying, speech that's disruptive in the workplace is not protected. So you can be terminated. Now you do have some rights. There is a National Labor Relations Act that protects employees' ability to talk about issues that deal with the job. So let's say an attorney, for example, what we say crosses over into politics from time to time, especially when we're dealing with constitutional law. So if I'm standing if I'm standing in the break room, I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I was fortunate to work with an attorney who she defends Las Vegas Metro Police Department. That's all she does. And that was an excellent experience for me in constitutional law. And I was blessed to have worked with her. And we did trials. And so if she and I are talking about, so just to back up, what's in the media right now, excessive force. Police officer, the Derek Chauvin conviction last week for his murder of George Floyd. If Lisa, the attorney I work for, her name's also Lisa, if she and I are sitting in the office and we are talking about the use of force in that case, that's protected. We can talk about that because it has to do with the job. But, if you're working at McDonald's and you're talking about the Derek Chauvin conviction, whether your opinion is one way or another, you can be terminated for that. It is not protected speech. So the speech has to relate to your job in order for it to be protected on the job. And then the other thing too is it's just unwise to be discussing politics or social issues in the workplace.
I'm going to jump in now because, Lisa, it seems to me certain things are now taboo. Politics, sex, economics can be very touchy, wage information. So there are so many things that you really can't talk about. It's a matter of what can you talk about. So
I know, right? You're exactly right. I mean, you said economics. Who 20 years ago wouldn't be allowed to discuss economics? Now has a connotation, right? Because of the political ideology. When you talk economics, my brain goes to socialism or progressive platforms versus capitalism. 30 years ago, it was just about raising taxes. So, the question, I understand the question, what can you talk about? The answer is you can talk about whatever you want. You are not free from the repercussions of what you say. And if you are in a job where what you're talking about does not relate to your job in any way, you should be conscientious about your surroundings. You should be aware of your audience and understand that what you say could have consequences. Whether the consequences are right or wrong is a different, I can give you my opinion, but what's going to happen is now employers are so concerned about losing their client base. So let's use some things that employees say could cause a conflict of interest for the employer. Even I, as an attorney, let's say I, on social media, back PETA, and let's say that I have come out on social media and I say, I don't eat meat, I don't wear leather, I hate, anybody who kills animals or immoral scumbag. And that gets blasted to our client who's a manufacturer of leather goods. Well, do I have the right to free speech? Yes, I do. Did what I say cause our client to mistrust and distrust my ability to represent him or her or his company unbiasedly? Yeah, so I could be terminated for those comments. So we have to be aware of what is our job. And I don't agree with what's happening with social media and cancel culture for multiple reasons. A baby boomer, for example, let's talk about the current issue with policing. It's a hot topic, and I don't mean to be dismissive, but there is this growing trend towards defunding the police or reimagining the police. Well, what if you have a son or a grandson who's a police officer, and you make a comment on social media that you back the blue, or, you know, that comment to some people could have a connotation that you're racist or you know, I mean, my point is, it's no longer the thing that you say that is interpreted anymore. Now you could say that you support a cause and there's an implication that you are misogynist or, you know, anti-Semitic or sexist, all the ists, right? Racist.
Jump in again, Lisa, because the word defunding is a bad word.
Yeah.
And it's misconstrued.
Yes.
Because what I think a lot of people mean is don't take away money, but retrain. Add certain components where a lot of the aspects of police work are related to community involvement, to social work. And maybe you start training others in these areas too. So when you start using words like defunding, it sounds like people want to say, take away money from the police. They're not doing their job. So every word has meaning. Every word has a different connotation. And it's a matter of not only what you're saying, but who you're saying it to. And then what happens is with social media, I always think of the old thing with the telephone where there are 10 people and you're playing, you know, rumors, and you start with one thing at one end, and by the 10th person, everything's completely changed. So in everything, it's like what's happening now is everything's on steroids because of social media, because of the fact you push a button on your computer and say, oops, I didn't mean that, but it's out there.
That's right. It's out there. And you just explained the other scenario. Both opinions, depending on the phrasing that you use. So the defund the police. Well, right now there's a bill that just passed the House in DC and is in the Senate, and they're looking at making reforms, right? And some of those reforms should not be controversial. No-knock warrants, for example. But we don't need to get into all of that. My point is that if you say something, you know, let's say you do say on social media, you use the phrase defund the police, because you and your intellectual ability know that that doesn't mean, in your mind, do away with the police. So you use that. You say defund the police because you know that it means trying to fix policing or transform some of the policies that have resulted in unnecessary death, for example. No-knock warrants, right? Breonna Taylor, some say that her death was the result of a bad policy, which allowed police officers to go in without a warrant. That's some opinion. So, but the point is, you discussing that, and if you say you have an opinion on one or the other, but the issue goes back to, let's say you are the mother of police officers, and so you go in your social media and you say things that others interpret incorrectly. We want to have the ability to speak. And so the concern, like you said, is all of this is having the impact of chilling free speech. Dialogue is dying because people are afraid they will lose their jobs. And it's a valid concern, because you can turn on the news every single day and see scenarios where, you know, this cheerleader who's going to court, her parents stood up for her and said she made these comments on social media, and the case is going all the way to the Supreme Court. My daughter should not face the repercussions of what she said on social media. She should be given the same access to sports. And that case will be decided. So the problem is that now we're no longer able to say the things that we want to say, to stand up for our beliefs or state our opinions without repercussions that we wouldn't have faced maybe 5 or 10 years ago.
I have to interject, Lisa. We've run over. I want to continue this dialogue, but we're out of time.
Oh, no.
Another hour or so. We barely scratched the surface, but I have to wrap the show now. Lisa Zastrow, this has been fascinating. I want to thank you so much for being our guest on Gracefully Graying today. To our viewers, I want to thank you for watching Gracefully Graying. I want you to watch this video, like it, share it, and also go to our Gracefully Graying website at gracefullygraying.com and like and share that. Thank you so much.